keep going and going. So we're going to have you each share, we'll start at that and work our way down. Please briefly share about your professional experience working with nature as a partner in mental health. So what was your training and a summary of nature-based therapy services you've been involved with. So we'll start down there.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
All right, again, I'm Samantha McCormick. I'm currently a school counselor here in Winona at the senior high. And I've been kind of around Winona quite a bit. I was at the ALC before I moved over to the high school, and I was also at Cotter Junior High for a little bit and Madison Elementary when it existed. And before that I was with Houston Public Schools. So I've been a school counselor for a while. And the nature therapy is kind of newer for me. I did not do the forest bathing because the budget was an issue for me, and I didn't know about your grant, darn it. But I did it through it's called the Natural Wellness Academy, and it was kind of the same kind of thing, like a 6-month sort of, my program was asynchronous, but you had a coach and you worked through the material and the activities and reflection. And so I'm a certified nature therapy guide, so not a nature therapist. They make a big difference between the therapy guide and a therapist, because the idea is nature kind of is the therapist, and so you're just guiding people so they can make their own connections with nature, which is kind of what brought me to doing this, is because nature is a huge part of my life. Growing up, I was always outside. It was just my way of connecting and resetting. I loved being out looking at birds. I'm a big bird nerd in my life. I was going to say in spare time, but it's a way of living. And just being outside, I really connected to it. And that Last Child in the Woods came out in 2005, just when I started having babies. So I was all about it. Like, oh my God, I felt that panic of how can I make sure my kids grow up like I did. So with my own children, it was a big focus, and we were outside all the time camping, and my little girls played with bugs and, just had that. So finally, when I made the connection, I find myself always going to nature to reset. I've had, in every hard time that I've had in my life, and we all have ups and downs, I find myself always gravitating to nature as a reset. So I wanted to use that in working with the kids that I serve. And I first noticed the need for it when I was at the ALC. I shared earlier, those of us who couldn't paddle, just the need for students, because they just don't have access. They don't even know what they're missing. And that really appealed to me when I was at the ALC. Our big end of the year field trip was to Whitewater State Park. And those kids look forward to it every year. And the kids, the story is, we have the children that come up from like Chicago and urban areas that had no idea what Whitewater was. And that was very apparent when the day of Whitewater came, and these ladies were in this red bodysuit and big gold hoops. And it's like, what do you think Whitewater is? So just to watch them go from that to experiencing it and complaining about the air being itchy to chasing each other with caterpillars and looking forward to it the next year, it was just, that kind of sealed it for me. Like, there's something else here, and I think I can take something that I love and use it in the schools. So I pursued my nature therapy guide training, and I'm in the beginning stages of how do we incorporate this into the school, because trying to get the buy-in and everybody on the same page is kind of hard. I'm lucky I have got Gloria in the district, so we're like, who do we need to convince? So currently I'm just using it one-on-one with students, with walking and just having things like a little Zen garden, and I always collect heart rocks, so we talk about things in nature, and I'll have kids now that will bring me a heart rock they found, and it's really sweet. And I have weaseled my way into the classrooms a little bit. So we have a stress management class that I'm able to go into, and a psychology of youth class with Dwayne that he lets me come in and take kids out on guided sessions. But I'm hoping that we can move it forward. I'm interested to hear from any of you, because I know you're beyond us. So I have a little imposter syndrome sitting up here, because I would love a school forest, and there's so much more that we could do. So I'm just in the beginning. I'm just a baby.
Well, I'm a baby with you. And I say that because there's just so much to learn. And I love that about the approach of being in nature and utilizing mindfulness as a collaborator with nature. Those are two of the areas of my background. I kind of can't really place a finger on like when my work with nature began, because it just really feels like it's embedded in the threads of who I am as a person, starting back from my childhood. So when I decided to pursue clinical social work, I knew that like as much as I possibly could, that would be like a goal of the foundation of my practice, and I'm still learning every day how to do that more and more with people that I work with. I've been leading different kinds of retreats and camps for children all the way to, adulthood of all ages, primarily in the outdoors in one way, shape, or form over the last 10 plus years. And sometimes that looks like truly sleeping in the middle of a rainstorm in the beautiful Kinstone, megalithic rock garden across the river, to camping, to renting Holzinger Lodge and using the trails there, to being at Prairie Island, to using the park systems that we have in Winona, and really just making making the focus of my work so that folks feel like nature is available to them in all different kinds of ways. So without getting too much further into it, I'll just say that in my current work that I do most of the time, I did offer mindfulness in the schools, across the districts in Winona and some of the surrounding schools, starting about 10 years ago. And Laura and I just discovered that we both studied at Mindful Schools out of Berkeley, California, and that was a great foundation for integrating mindfulness into different types of outdoor experiential learning. So I take that training along with my clinical trauma-informed social work training and do the best that I can each time that I can invite folks to work in the outdoors. So thank you.
I'm Mike Gamber. I live in Winona. I moved back here about 3 years ago. I came here in the early 90s to go to college and just fell in love with. Well, I came here initially when my sister was going to St. Mary's and I was in 7th grade, and it just left a really strong impression on me as like the bluffs, because I was from Chicago, and I was really into camping when I was a kid. I was in the Boy Scouts, and like I lived for those camping trips, and then it was like, oh my God, I can like live basically in the woods. Like that's gonna be amazing. Like I didn't even think about the school part of it, but I got through that, and this area, just like I really love this area. I went out and I became a guide. I guided for 10 or 15 years at 3 different places around the country. It was mostly all wilderness therapy programs. And so adjudicated population, and then more like high income kids whose parents sent them to us, and a whole mix of things. And yeah, I did that for a while, and then I managed there, and then I went to work in mental health as a skills trainer for 12 years in Portland. So I worked at a great place. They let us basically do what we wanted, as far as they like really trusted us. Like I would see a kid like 2 or 3 times a week and have a couple hours with them. I could just go pick them up with my dog in my car. We'd go fishing, we'd go hiking. And so now all this like research is coming out to prove that this stuff actually like changes their brains. It helps them regulate. But at the time it was sort of like, well, that sounds good. We trust you and we think that's helping them. And so I'm really grateful that I got to work at places that were like that. Like they just basically trusted. I mean, the science is great, but we all know this stuff already. So as children, like when I was a kid, I remember just like being really like thinking about being around the fire, like at, on camping trips, and just being like, oh God, I can't wait to just like be sitting around the fire like at night. And when I was in like 7th, 8th grade or whatever, just intuitively knew like that was good, and so that was like my way of taking care of myself. I mean, I wasn't like choosing to do that like because my house was really crazy and I needed like a place so I could feel good, but I was doing that, and like So like, and then that's just like what I've done with a lot of my life. And shared that with kids. And what I found is like, the thing that's so great is like, there's a lot of pressure when you're working with kids that are really troubled, trying to help them, to fix them or to like get answers. And like, you go out there and they're like trying to like figure out what's going on with this kid, and they won't talk about what's happening. They're like going crazy in school, or acting out, and so they're like, okay, the team, you feel like this pressure to get them to talk and like get answers, and in a way it was, for me, that was counterproductive, because it was like, I was trying too hard, but then when I go out with them and do stuff that I love with them, and being outdoors, like a lot of times they just start talking, you like go fishing for the whole time, you'd be driving home, and all of a sudden they would just start venting, and a lot happened like that. So for me, like, if I could like be out there, like not really, it's like a less codependent way to try to help kids for me. It's because in a way I'm being selfish, because I'm doing what I want, and I'm not like trying to help them directly, because the kids we were working with had pretty severe issues. Like, they were kind of the most severe behaviors before being like institutionalized, essentially. So they had a lot of people trying to help them all the time. So if it was just me, we're just going to do something fun that was healthy, it was like they would buy into it, and they would feel pressured to like, disclose things they didn't want to talk about or whatever. So I don't know. That's just generally been my experience. And now actually I'm kind of retired, I guess, because I drive school bus and I cook in a kitchen. And I moved back here, and I know I want to maybe get more involved again, volunteering or something. But I'm kind of just like doing my own thing for now.
Hey, school bus drivers.
Yeah.
Can be like therapists too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. One last thing about that too. Like, there was a whole study about like, I don't know if I can go into this right now, because I'm using a lot of time.
Yeah, we're not
I will pass to the next person. There's a whole study about just spending time transporting kids. Actually, it does help them a lot. But anyways, I'll pass on that.
Well, you piqued our curiosity. Hello, everyone. My name is Ariel Johnson. You can also call me AJ. I use they and she pronouns, and I am a nature-based therapist in Minneapolis. I work at a small group practice called Minneapolis Nature-Based Therapy, and I, too, feel incredibly selfish. It's like, oh, I get to just be outside all day. I get to work with folks outdoors. I have just started doing paddling sessions with the client where we go in a 2-person kayak and do our therapy on the water, and I'm just like, how am I getting paid for this? This is like too good to be true. And I feel incredibly grateful to have landed here. I had been practicing clinical social work at a nonprofit called Rainbow Health that tragically and very shockingly dissolved with no warning last summer. And Rainbow Health was formerly the Minnesota AIDS Project, and this nonprofit had been around for decades, serving thousands and thousands of clients throughout the state of Minnesota. And when I lost my job, I really wasn't sure what to do next, and fortunately I had already been in contact with Carrie, the owner of Minneapolis Nature-Based Therapy, and she took me under her wing and let me join with all the interns last fall. So I am a relatively new nature-based therapist. I'm in my first year, so getting to have my first fall, my first winter, my first spring, and now summer has been profound. It like makes me want to cry. I absolutely adore this work, and I'm so thrilled that there are so many of you and of us who are interested in this and seeing the benefits to youth and adults alike. And I have other things I could say, but I'll keep it at that for time.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Laura Lenz and I teach English learners at Riverside Central Elementary and the Rochester School District. That's been my career most of my life, but the previous 3 years I had this kind of unicorn, amazing job as a mindfulness teacher full-time. I got special funding for it, and so I taught mindfulness to all kids, grades K through 5, and social emotional skills, and also provided support to teachers and all the staff at school as well. And increasingly, especially because Sarah works at our school, she comes once a month and does work with the kindergartners and 5th graders. We connected, and then I was able to be a part of the Healing Forest cohort and become a certified nature and forest therapy guide. So increasingly as I worked, I found that the best vehicle for kids to get connected with mindfulness was in nature. And we have a school forest, and so I just take them outside as much as possible. We do structured activities, a lot of unstructured activities, a lot of play, and I just found it to be just kind of the best way for them to really get in touch with what it means to be present and help each other take risks, explore, feel joyful. And now I have a partnership with Quarry Hill in Rochester, and so I'm offering public nature therapy walks there once a month.
Hi, I'm Jan Wellick, and I teach environmental studies at UW La Crosse. The last few years, I've gotten to teach a mindfulness in nature class, but I've been doing this work for close to 25 years. I'm not certified as a therapist, that's not my background, but I come from more the writing and art and outdoor education angle, and so I worked for environmental organizations for 10 years in California, and I started this program called Eco Expressions, that's nature art. And so I started over time just working with youth doing exploration outside, adding lots of art components. I noticed, if you haven't looked at this exhibit in here, it speaks to, they've all written up their little pieces about creative expression and basically how art is healing them by doing these creations, and I thought that's perfect in here. So I worked way back, working even as a volunteer with like an art therapy organization in California called Arts. And that was my first taste, and again, kind of got thrown into it, but I did a garden program where the kids explored the garden, but it was a residential treatment center, and I had no training. And I just remember kids hiding under tables, and it was very transformational for me to work with them and get them outside and see that change. And I started working with youth in rehab and taking them on bird watching hikes, and so all those different angles kind of pull into what I do.
Thank you. And then we're gonna have Becca online there. Becca, we're on the first question. So yeah, just about your professional experience working with nature as a partner, mental health, your training, and then some of the services you provide. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I work in Golden Valley and intuitive therapy. I am a nature-based, climate-aware art therapist. And I went to Abbott Graduate School. I've been doing different trainings through different organizations. One of the certifications I have is nature-based expressive arts for healing trauma and grief. And I've also trained with Becky Krenz, who works at the same group that AJ works at Minneapolis Nature Base, but she used to work at Intuitive Therapy, and so she has this ecotherapy training for the Earth Body Institute, and so I've done training with her here in Minnesota to set up client sessions outdoors with ritual and ceremony. And I work at outdoors with clients at the nature center that's adjacent to the building that I have for my office. I also have a location where I can work with people if they want to bring their dogs around a small pond. And my work is very much my special interest and sort of special client focus is on people who have climate distress. And that spans all age groups, but certainly like the teenage and young adult clients that I work with have a different world that they were born into. And I work to help re-weave people into the web of life. And that is deeper than what my entry point into this work was. So in the academic sphere, I think we learn a lot about the science of why nature-based therapy is evidence-based. But like one of the other panelists talked about, we kind of intuitively know because we are organic beings that we are nature. And so the work is really moving people out of the lens of seeing everything in the world as being an object and moving them into the lens of seeing everything as alive, even the object in the built. And that's more of an indigenous space, and I am not an indigenous person, but I have relationships with people who are and have, I guess, entered into some of the web of life work through that reconnects, and then also into relationships with people who offer training and tools for anybody who kind of weave this circular understanding of life as cycles into their work that's healing work. And so sometimes that means many times I integrate art and express art into work with clients, and many times we're outdoors. And what I guess my favorite thing about the job is that many times nature moves response to people being regulated again. And so clients come really dysregulated and upset about something. They work through it in the session, and what typically emerges is a natural world that is feeling safe around us as people. And so animals are emerging from the swamps or the woods. And we have animal encounters really frequently after people are back into a safe place in their bodies. And oftentimes a metaphor emerges from the way that the animals are interacting with us that really resonates or replicates or mirrors what the clients are working on. And that shifts people in a way that is not possible in the built world, but emerges very naturally. And we need those moments of awe to retrain the brain to be able to feel safe at a new baseline. And I think that's the real power of this work and why it stays fresh and alive compared to some of the work that can become tedious in talk therapy. Not sure, I could probably say more, but that seems to be where my thoughts are stopping.
Thank you, that was amazing. So yeah, just the experience of this panel here, this is incredible. We move on to question 2, and we can kind of popcorn whoever wants to take a shot at answering some of these things kind of pass the mic. In what ways, we already did that. Question number 3, how do you adapt for winter and poor weather conditions? What are some ways around that? Or to work with that as a partner?
I'll just say something quick about that. At Riverside, we have a very low income population, a lot of kids that have experienced a lot of trauma, but and they're amazing and resilient. And we also are a full service community school. So we have a room that has clothing and food and offers lots of services. So I consider, like when we were talking about the Bill of Rights or the for nature, that it's really a social justice issue, like at Riverside, that kids have access to green space. And even though some of them live in apartments with green space, their families don't feel safe to let them play out there. So for me, like I have access to clothing, and so if we're going outside and it's cold, I just grab a ton of sweaters. So if anybody complains, I have something for them. So for me, it's very practical, and that way all of our kids can get outside for recess and whatever else.
Jump on to school. I agree with that access is an issue, but I personally love winter and stormy weather because I think that's the best lessons that come from it, because we're teaching kids, it's easy to get excited about going outside when it's nice in a day like this, but there's so many things that we can learn from nature. Like, our lives are cyclical. When I'm working with my kids, you know, there's something to be known for. Winter might look boring and like nothing's happening, but really there's a lot happening. What can you see? And having them dig down, and what is the winter in your life? What's happening in you that people can't see? So I find it really powerful. In my personal life, I had open heart surgery unexpectedly 2 years ago, and I found myself in a very winter time as I was finishing up my training. So for me, that's very profound, and I found that very helpful for kids with trauma and hard things. Like, it might be really hard right now, but it's just what it's supposed to be. You know, it's that classic mental health, like, it might look like it's barren, but what's going on? And spring will come again. And what are the signs of spring? What are your signs of spring that you're seeing? You know, I love the stormy weather and the bad weather. There's no bad weather, right? But it is no joke that access is an issue, because how can you take kids out and show them? But luckily we have pictures and books and things like that, but that's what I do.
One of the ways that I adapt my outdoor therapy practices in the winter, or that I practiced with this past winter, was making sure that we were moving our bodies in some way throughout the whole session. And it's a real exercise in distress tolerance for some folks to be out in the cold for 50 to 60 minutes, especially if they're not used to that. And one of the ways that, you know, that we had to switch things a little bit from fall into winter. I had some clients who were really enjoying sitting during our sessions. But, you know, we sort of decided, like, well, in order to stay warm enough for this whole session, we're gonna have to move, we're gonna have to walk usually. One of the things I forgot to mention in my introduction is that I am also EMDR trained, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And so I've been starting to practice EMDR with clients outside, and I'm not entirely sure I'm gonna do that in the winter yet, but you get bilateral stimulation just by walking, and then there's like a little bit more you can incorporate into. So I'm thinking about those things, but yeah, access is a huge piece. I'm glad that that's come up, and I think there are ways to address that. In fact, actually, the DNR representative who taught us fly fishing, she was saying that there are lots of grants through the DNR for outdoor recreation equipment. So perhaps we could all apply for some and then get free stuff for our clients to stay warm in the winter.
I'll take a stab at this too. I think everything that everyone's saying is great, and I think there's also the flip side of how does the therapist adapt when you have multiple appointments outside in the winter. And I last year ended up getting a cold shock, which like really impacted my health, and it made me realize, oh, you know, it's sometimes therapists forget that they need to, like, they're part of the equation and figuring out how do we adapt to winter. So even as a therapist who has like really warm clothes and like I have electric, you know, gloves and stuff like that, it doesn't mean that you are able to do all of your appointments depending on what's happening in the weather. So you might actually just move some stuff indoors because you physically can't tolerate it. And then from the climate aware therapy perspective, a lot of what's happening in the weather systems matters because of climate change. And so everybody in my practice is pretty much talking about that openly. And so those patterns, they're not used as metaphor the way that they would be for emotional processing that was mentioned earlier. It's used to like think practically about how is this impacting you and what you want to do about it. How do we move into action around this? Because action helps like mitigate the anxiety that comes with these climactic shifts. And the winters have been so different, especially even last year, and the summer has been so different that it isn't even adapting to winter that's the biggest issue this year. It's adapting to smoke.
Okay.
So that's, I guess, what I add about that.
I think it's something, yeah.
I just want to add to how I also work with folks when I'm not working in the outdoors, which I don't work with all of my clients outdoors. It's a mixture, but particularly in what we might call like extremely cold weather or, you know, rain and thunder. I feel really lucky that my space that I work out of has a very large open area with gigantic windows and a lot of plants. And so I tend to do things like on some of those days where like we'll sprawl out yoga mats or meditation cushions and just bask in the sun like that's coming through the windows. We'll take the opportunity to like take care of the plants, prune the plants, water the plants, take out containers of little pebbles that I have and do like pebble mandalas. And so still working with, it was a little bit, as you had mentioned earlier today, Kathy, I think about ways to bring in the natural environments into our spaces, schools or offices, our homes, to still have the benefit of maybe we wouldn't officially call it forest bathing, but working with and being with and surrounding ourselves in the natural world indoors. So I think that's something that's very helpful for the folks that I work with on days that they are not maybe interested in going out, or in some of my clients who aren't yet ready, or maybe are not interested in going outside at all for their therapy session, based on some different just stipulations that they might have, and a way to continue to incorporate that.
Okay, we're gonna stick along the line of challenges. So outside of weather, what would be some other challenges of providing nature-based therapy that come to mind?
Sometimes perceptions, kids may have an association with the outdoors that's like negative or something. It's not part of my culture, or so they might not be really open to it. Or sometimes the parents, when they're related to cold weather, they might be like, hey, you can't go out right now, it's too dangerous, you know. And so they have like unreasonable fears about the outdoors. They haven't spent a lot of time outdoors, so they just like don't see that as an option. So yeah, modeling how to overcome that with them, and like showing them it's actually pretty exciting to be like out when it's 10 below and you're warm and comfortable, and like there's something exhilarating about being in a rainstorm in a tent and being totally dry. Like that's a level of connection that they can experience, and it can empower them then to just like, wow, like I can interface with nature. Like they're used to like interfacing with technology, they know they're comfortable, but a lot of kids now, they're just not, they don't really see the options, it's just kind of out there. So I guess helping them, just giving them little opportunities to experience that.
One of my greatest challenges providing therapy to folks in the Twin Cities is bumping into people that either I know or the client knows. And that's something we talk about at the beginning of practicing outdoors, is that with being out in nature, the unexpected is going to happen. And that might be as lovely as getting to gaze upon an eagle soaring, and it might be as awkward as bumping into a former coworker or an ex, or who knows. And that's something that we always talk about initially, and I feel like folks are like, yeah, it'll be fine. And then when it happens, and it hasn't happened to me often, but when it happens, it sometimes can be a little bit jolting and a little bit, and a big interruption to the session. So for me, my best practice is to like, almost try to like not acknowledge people I see if they're coming our way. I'm just gonna look down, I'm gonna like nod, or like maybe give them like one of these, just sort of a very subtle like, hello, I see you, but like do not talk to me. So that's something I run into.
I would say in the public school system, it's time. Just that the classroom teachers they have so many requirements for curriculum they need to deliver and cover, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's new stuff coming out every year. So at Riverside, we have a great outdoor learning environment. We have hammocks, we have logs to play on, and it's still a barrier for a lot of teachers because they just feel like they need to get this thing done. So I think that's just something to think creatively about, and maybe it's the counselors and the social workers in the building that can do a little bit more of that. In my unicorn role, I can do that all the time, which leads me to the next problem, which is money, because jobs like that often get cut, which mine did. So it's hard to sustain those things that we know help the whole child grow. But, you know, when schools are cutting classroom teachers, it's hard to argue, you know, but it's just something to think about where our priorities are, I guess, with education and mental health, so.
Time and money.
Someone had made a comment, I don't remember if it was on the comment sent in, about like, what's the word you guys use, like in a session, like the privacy, because if you're taking them outside, other confidentiality, other kids can see. You're with the therapist walking around the school, so like how do you address that confidentiality piece when you're outside with the kiddos, you know? I don't know, any of your thoughts on that? Sorry, can you share what you were gonna share?
Yeah, well, and I would maybe echo what AJ was saying, which is, I mean, for me, I always address how confidentiality just will look different in the outdoors. And I try to select private places that are also accessible for folks. But that's why some of the folks that I work with are not comfortable working in the outdoors, is just because of that as a possibility. So I don't know, other people might say more about that. The other thing that I wanted to quickly add, just for me personally, is someone working in private practice, so I make my own schedule. And so if I were to think about the question of challenges, would be for me trying to figure out just how to coordinate it all. Because as I mentioned, I don't only work, I don't see all of my clients outdoors. And so though Winona is a small-ish community, I might be trying to see somebody over in that area, and then I maybe need to get back to my office, but then I might be seeing somebody over there by the river, and selecting that based on, you know, maybe what their interests or comfort levels are. And so it can, I still, like when I was saying so much I'm still learning in the babyhood, is how to do that, like, so that I'm not like rushing and being completely, you know, overwhelmed or stressed myself to try to get to all of these places, and yet all of the places don't necessarily match with the folks that I'm working with. And so that's just kind of a logistical challenge that I face as the therapist.
So I too struggle with that, and one of the things that Carrie, the owner of Minneapolis Nature-Based Therapy, told me at the very beginning was choose your office locations. You have a physical office that you go to that's indoors, and then your outdoor office locations can be the ones that are close by or convenient to your home or whatever. And that really helped me, because I was thinking like, yeah, I'll go all over the cities. Like, sure, I'll be in North and then South and then St. Paul and wherever. And that would have been a logistical nightmare. And even still, with having my few spots that are relatively close, I mostly bike commute actually, so it does take a little bit longer for that reason. And what I have learned is that I just have to, I need so much more time to simply figure out my schedule logistics every week than I would have thought. And so I just kind of think of that as like, well, this is not time that I'm getting paid for, but I am like enjoying getting to be in a few different spots enough that it feels worthwhile to me to do that logistical bouncing around. So I don't know if that's actually helpful, but.
Yeah, related to that, driving the kids, like to get to whatever spot you're going to is actually like, it's helpful. It's an awesome opportunity to like check in before and after. So like if I had a 2 hour, an hour and a half, it might take 20 minutes for us to drive to the river. And that could be seen as like, oh, that's a waste of time. It costs a lot of money. And I mean, I don't like burning fuel if I don't need to, but it is, yeah, when you're driving with somebody and they're next to you and you're sitting in tandem, it's like a nice way to talk back and forth. Like the kids feel comfortable because it's like they have their own space and you're like moving in tandem versus like sitting like this, you know? So, and then you go do the activity and then you're driving back, and it seems like that drive back is oftentimes where a lot of stuff gets talked about. So like, it is a challenge to overcome, but it is also like, it helps too, so, yeah.
Jan, I was gonna ask you about the college students. So thinking about challenges, like what kind of pushback you get ever from a student? I mean, granted, you gotta pass my class, you gotta do this, but there's a little carrot there, but what kind of pushback, and like how do you help encourage them? Because you do some journaling, like nature journaling stuff. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, there's a range. They dress in oh, can you hear me without this? Should I talk?
You're such a gentle.
I'm not. Young people show up with like their no socks on, and we're going to create nature art, using ice and stuff. And I'm like, why aren't you wearing boots? But so that stuff happens all the time. I wish I had extra clothes. Did I go over there? You asked me about challenges.
And then how you would, help.
So they're like young people where they aren't necessarily dressing
Right.
properly.
I get it.
And then they get uncomfortable, and I'm like, that's because you don't have a winter jacket on. And we're gonna be outside for an hour. So those things are tricky, but they're creating, we still do things in January when they're collecting things outside. And if they can get past that, it's great. And then some don't like if we do forest bathing and they're barefoot, I don't make anyone. I invite them to be barefoot, but some folks don't want to be barefoot, if we're not used to it. So I just try to accommodate them. Maybe you sit in a barefoot, maybe you're not walking around, just transitioning to that comfort level.
And I'm trying to remember your course, you got a lot of students, because it's an intro course, how that looks. Because we don't have other college folks here today, do we? But that's something to think about how it can be. I know RCTC did something similar. I led a walk on campus for them, and then their biology instructor there, Mr. Corey Rubin. I don't know if you know Corey. He offered a nature-based. It wasn't nature-based therapy. It was nature-based writing, reflection, summer program, kind of based on because he was just excited about the walk. But it's hitting all the intro students because they have to take a biology course. Heck yeah, I want to take the one where we go outside and do art and do writing. I was like, that's clever.
Yeah, they've really enjoyed as I've added more to the first year seminar that's mindfulness. They're loving it, and it shocked me, so I didn't put it in at the beginning, but I add more. We do full on meditation, and they love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on that challenges one? Everybody had a chance to share that wanted to share. Okay, what are some of the greatest rewards? And maybe you've already said some of this, but the greatest rewards of doing this work. Kick it off, Kirsten.
I think for me, it's a very
The mic's not on. I really, I
The
can't
bottom
hear you.
button on the bottom, try that again.
There.
There.
Now I can talk like this.
Sorry,
Let me tell you about the rewards.
For me, it's very selfish. It's a way that I can still do what I love while I'm working, which I also love, but it just makes work even more enjoyable because I'm sharing such a big part of me. I feel like I'm able to be fully me, which helps me help the kids be fully them. So for me, it's a selfish thing, and that's the best thing is, and watching the love blossom with kids that didn't even know what they were missing, and yeah.
Yeah, I would say, because I oftentimes will meet with people, as I've said before, some people automatically have sought me out to work with me in therapy because they're interested in nature-based therapy, and other folks would be like, that is not at all what I'm into. And I still talk about it and provide education about it and the benefits of it every session in some way, shape, or form. And so watching the transition of people being like, well, maybe, all right, okay, yeah, all right, maybe next time. And then eventually taking the step into trying to be together in nature And then hearing the feedback has 100% been, wow, I had no idea that's what it would be like. I didn't know, I thought it would be something totally different, or that wasn't gonna be for me. And so I think just watching the evolution of encouraging folks, even if they're not ready for it, and then, walking with them, like meeting them where they're at and walking with them on that journey to be able to find their way back into that what was it called earlier today, Kathy? Biophilia, that where people really find themselves, has been mentioned, like I am nature, and not knowing that and discovering about themselves is just such an incredibly joyful feeling.
I guess for me, it's just the experience that it's not dependent on me, and just, I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, like, just the experiences with the kids where it's very serendipitous, the things that would happen, because I was working in the community and like, yeah, I don't know. Got to do a lot of fun stuff, like was mentioned, saying it's like, get to do the things that I love. Get to watch kids that have fun, and who, they weren't having much fun, and so it felt good, like, hey, at least they had a good time today, and it was healthy, and so, yeah, there was a lot of that.
Fun is so important, not just for kids, for all of us. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so hard to choose, honestly. I really resonate with what you shared, Trish. The vast majority of my caseload came with me from Rainbow Health, and so almost no one was seeking out nature-based therapy, though several of my clients were pumped, and I was like, yes, okay, we're gonna figure this out together. And then for others, it's really been kind of like thinking through the hesitation and the barriers, and learning how to incorporate more nature-based techniques into my telehealth sessions with folks who are strictly or mostly telehealth. But gosh, I think getting to see how much calmer and happier people are outside is, it's so rewarding for me, and like I just feel calmer and happier outside too. I feel my most me, I feel most authentic, most alive, and I do think that rather than meeting in an office setting, which, there's nothing wrong with that, and I still do that too, but something about meeting outdoors helps break down the power differential between therapists and their clients. We are on the same grass. We are, we are just two humans out here trying to navigate this wild world together. And I think it's more similar to how, humans have helped each other heal for forever.
Well, as a teacher for 30 years, teachers are notorious for having strict lesson plans and goals and objectives. But the more I've done this work, the more I've kind of loosened the reins in the school forest and given kids tools. Kids do need tools. So like if I do something along the nature therapy line, it helps to have things like binoculars and magnifying glasses and bug catchers. But letting them direct the process, letting it be a little more student-led. And Kathy, what you said about like nature as metaphor, like, yeah, I could talk to a kid about how he needs to learn to focus in class, but this kid then got really interested in a heron on the river one day. And at first he was just like, oh, that's kind of cool. He's not really doing much. And I said, yeah, but if you stay here and are patient and you watch for a while, maybe something will happen, or just see what happens. And that kid stood there for like 20 minutes, binoculars sometimes, sometimes not, and then he eventually came running over to me and said, that heron just caught a big fish and swallowed it down whole, and then I can kind of reflect back to him in a sneaky way, wow, you were so patient and focused, and maybe someday I can relate that to schoolwork, but I don't know, so many of those experiences happened where kids took risks, jumping from cottonwood tree to cottonwood tree, and helped each other, and I just couldn't explain that in a lecture or, in a school discussion. So I've just seen joy and play and soothing. I've seen kids be really soothed is the word that comes up for me.
I would just add that I think the most rewarding thing for me since the beginning is how immediate it is. Like, I was shocked the first time I took teens in recovery out bird watching, and immediately it was like you could feel the guard come down, and they're like super excited. They never use binoculars. So since day one, it still shocks me how it's not about me or us, no offense, but it's the space. It really is the space, and I feel like that's the most healing thing.
Oh, yeah. So I would echo everything everyone is saying, and I think that what I'm hearing is we get to speak from our hearts and be authentic as providers, which is the modeling that matters when we're healing or supporting people in their healing, and they get to become alive again, and to see somebody transform from feeling depressed or being overly anxious and come back into their bodies and be safe, and the color in their skin changes, the light in their eyes brightens up, they breathe regularly again. We all know what that feels like, to be dysregulated and to just witness that over and over again. It happens in the office, but it happens profoundly outside. And so it's getting out of the head and into the body.
Okay, so thinking about insurance and liability. And maybe you all face the liability in a different way, not all of you deal with the insurance piece of that. I'm just thinking how does that look? How do healthcare companies recognize? Is it different? I don't know what that looks like. So maybe some thoughts on that.
When I was working as a skills trainer, when I first started, we were called skill builders, and then about halfway through, we started working under the medical model. So then they started billing all of our services as medical services, just like a hospital. So our pay went up like 30%, and which was nice. There was more paperwork, but I didn't have to do any of the billing or anything like that. But a lot of things that used to be not necessarily in the medical model are now. So you can bill insurance for them. I'm speaking generally here, but I think that is a trend in especially the nature stuff is becoming more. It's becoming recognized as a medical intervention. So.
I am so jealous that you've gotten to do, have extended time with kids. That, I guess this could have been in the challenge section of this talk, but so I bill for usually 60-minute sessions, and basically we have this agreement with the insurance companies that in nature-based therapy, the office is outside. And I don't think it was that hard for Gary to set up, but I wasn't on that side of things, so I guess it's a little bit harder to speak to. But when we're getting credentialed with the insurance companies, it's very explicit that we are nature-based therapy providing services outdoors, and that the office is outside. Because when you bill, you either have to put office or telehealth. So you put office, but then there's a little line underneath you say in nature-based therapy, the office is outdoors. But I would really love to be able to work with folks for more than an hour outside, because it often doesn't feel like enough time, especially for things like kayaking, or I'm really interested and excited about trying to do some cross-country skiing with clients, or maybe snowshoeing, just things that take a little more time because there's more gear involved. So I guess that's a curiosity of mine.
Would it work to, let's say you meet weekly, if you shifted to 2 hours every other week? So that you had that bulk time, would that fly in terms of how practice works and how insurance works?
Did you hear that question, Becca?
Yeah, insurance won't cover that.
Yeah.
It will cover that?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That's a great thought.
If you don't meet on the same day, twice a week, but you can't meet on the same day
Yeah, that's.
for 2 hours.
That's the limitation.
We'll cover 1 hour.
Well, that's stupid.
It is.
Let's change
I will add that where I work, we code it as, or I don't really know, I don't do the actual billing myself, but I code it in my notes as community. Because community can look like going to the library with someone, it could look like different types of exposure therapy where I'm going into a store with someone. And I mean, realistically, as I understand it and as I build, I can go anywhere with my clients. I call it community, and it gets paid as therapy in community. And that sometimes even looks like, well, that's how I bill for my office, because my office is separate from the private practice office space because of another business that I have there. So I call it community, and it gets paid for 60 minutes.
We don't bill at school.
But, you know, Samantha, have you, and Laura, and you know, like liability above and beyond regular teaching when you're doing outdoor stuff, and maybe have a push, you know, like I'm thinking you're doing kayaking now, with insurance for you guys, for your company's insurance, like that's a whole other layer when you start doing that kind of stuff. So I don't know what that
I think our district now does an overall blanket, like we used to have a permission slip, but now that's part of the registration every year where they sign. So that helps, because before we had to track people down. And our FIAD classes, we have an outdoor FIAD class that does kayaking and all of that stuff. So I think we have a big waiver that all the families sign at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, that's part of the consent form with, part of the consent form in the intake process for private practice.
A lot of people are afraid of the outdoors too, so I think, you know, just letting them know, like, it's more dangerous to drive to where you're going than what we're doing, and just trying to change that perception. And letting parents know, like, your kid might come back really dirty, might be a little scratched. You know, like, I mean, bigger organizations. I have a friend that runs a program I helped, and he tells parents, like, they might get hurt today. I mean, literally, he lets them know, like, they're gonna be taking risks. And he's developed that kind of relationship with his clients, like, you're sending your kids to my wilderness survival camp, and like, they're gonna be running around playing, and I let them choose their risk level to a degree, and like, and he's developed a relationship with the parents that you can do that, and they want it. They're like, yes, I want my kid to take risks. And so they're like bought in, so I think that helps on his own liability, letting the parents know like what their kids are getting into. And that's not like a big school, so like a school can't really operate that way necessarily, but like, if you run a smaller program.
I think though, like at Riverside, when we can, we bring families into it. So like Wilderness Inquiry comes and works with the kids during the day, and then we have a family event at night, so they get to see exactly what happened, or we show them stuff we're doing in the school forest. So I think if you can invite them in and they get to experience it too, it can be, you know, pretty cool.
I'll also just add that it's so interesting thinking about this conversation, like, yeah, there might be some physical harm to your child. Let's think about all the harm that's happening to your child if they never leave the house and if they're just on a screen all the time. You know, like, there are risks no matter what.
Any other thoughts on that one? Okay, so thinking more about schools, last question here, and then we'll open it up and let the audience bid out a few questions. What are some simple ways school staff and others who work with youth can begin incorporating nature into the work they do with youth to better support social, emotional well-being, and mental health? Nature into the work they're doing.
remember, I'm just a baby, so you guys need to tell me. I just started small, because that's all you can do, I think, until you can build in and find the other people in your schools, which we're already, you know, if you put it out there, we're gradually finding it. I was so excited when Sarah reached out, and I think that teachers even, and counselors can start small within your own classroom with, I love the idea of like incorporating plants and pictures, and I'm lucky as a school counselor with a beautiful green space behind us at the high school, I can go out for walks and nobody blinks an eye because I'm always walking around with kids if I wanted to. You know, like the kids won't feel like, oh, they're gonna be like, oh, they get to go outside, why? I wanna go outside. So I think that there's ways that you can start small, but I am definitely interested to hear from this panel too about tips from those of you that do the nature-based therapy, just ways to bring it in. We have such a struggle with time, like Laura said, teachers are trying to get all of these standards in and stick to their curriculum, and they don't want to lose time, and we're also confined by the time of a class. So if you find a teacher that's willing to let you come in, okay, we only have 47 minutes to, so it's tricky, but it's a worthy challenge, so I want to know. You guys tell me what I should do.
What more can I do?
Well, I would just add the idea, and again, I feel like it comes back to school budgets, and it's really, you know, the funding for it, but like I can speak on behalf, I have a daughter who's in high school, and she'll come home at the end of the day and just say, Mom, I had no windows all day long. I was in fluorescent lights all day long. I was looking at a PowerPoint all day long, you know, and meanwhile she's using her phone, and you know, it's like, and I get it, like that was one of the reasons for myself personally that I knew I wanted to do therapy in the outdoors, because I get extremely anxious myself when I'm in that kind of what you call more institutionalized setting. And so I think, I really think that Riverway Learning Community, a charter school in Winona here, nobody unfortunately from the schools here today, but they've done such a great job with their outdoor education and bringing it into the classroom and out of the classroom. And they moved to a new building. There's not a lot of windows. They're trying to add windows, but it's extremely expensive. So in the meantime, they've done things like paint the walls a certain color, hang like, you know, butterflies and insects, you know, from the ceilings, add these large screens like this that actually have like insects and nature sounds in the background, and they've dimmed the lighting, and they've added lamps, and they have plants. And so of course that's not the same as being able to go outside with the kids, and I just think of the teachers and like how they're having to pay so much out of their own pockets to transform their room, so that really makes me worried. But like I do feel like if in this interim of being able to find more collaborators to be able to do more in the schools, how to help transform the learning environments that they're in the moment, to be able to help soothe the nervous system during the school day when they can't be outdoors, to me, is part of what I could imagine as a step.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention real quick, so Riverway is an environmental charter school, they're underneath Osprey Wild. So she used to work for DNR. Nadine, yeah, so I don't remember how many schools around the state they have, but they're chartered underneath that, and they go through environmental education training, their staff do. It's a really unique school. Too bad more schools can't.
And they have a school course, only it's not next to their school, they bus the kids up the hill
To the YMCA.
To the YMCA.
And then they have
Yeah.
Yeah.
So four school course.
Pretty cool. Any other thoughts on that one? Would you just recommend the schools that want to start but don't really know where to start?
That's something that I've been doing for 20 years. So this book I wrote like 20 years ago about nature writing field guide for teachers and trying to get teachers to do little things. And I think after all these years, it really comes down to they don't need a lot of technology to get outside. And so I try to promote the most simplest things where like they just go sit under a tree. And it's just practicing helping the kids shut down really and regulating that space. So that's a huge passion of mine, is how do we get that into more schools? Everything from school gardening to nature journaling and just ways of actually experiential outside. And I think it's still a challenge 20 years later.
I had a good conversation with Colleen Rauenbacher, you guys here at Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center in Waynesboro, and Laura, we were talking about this too. They used to do a summer teacher institute there, and because Project when we first started back in 2005, we went and did some sessions at that, but that was where schools from the whole region were invited, so teachers would go in the summer, and it was like a week-long institute, and they knocked out all their CDUs, but it was all environmental focused. So it was from, you know, school gardens to all sorts of different things, and so trying to resurrect that. I know that Wolfridge Environmental Learning Center on the North Shore does similar things, but they don't focus on our driftless area, that's our turf down here. And so we were talking about that, could we make it a driftless area of focus for our local schools with a little more intimate, personal relationship building and networking for teachers? So that's something that we're talking about, trying to see if we can find some funding to start that up again.
We should chat because, I have a fellowship right now with Wisconsin DPI, and we're doing a series this summer, and so there's fellows across the state of Wisconsin, who are doing programs for educators that are environmental, and so it's been this whole year-long thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
I have one more thing that I could add to this topic. So one of the tools that is part of, I guess, working with kids in groups is finding nature allies or nature friends. And so that could mean in a school setting, it can be totally free for a teacher to go take a weekend, collect a basket full of nature items like pine cones, acorns, leaves, stones, moss, and that kind of thing. And that's like a basket that is normal to have inside of the therapy office. But you can have it in a room with kids, and they can pick that day what nature friend they're going to have depending on their age. It could be an ally. And this is a sensory experience, and so it's, instead of having a plastic fidget, you might be holding the pine cone and running your fingers down the edges of the pine cone. And I do that even in outdoor sessions with kids, and sometimes they destroy the objects. You know, a pine cone can be completely destroyed, but there is like value in that usually when it's happening. It's really informative to the adult in the room that this kid might not be presenting as anxious on the outside, but internally they need to get up and take a break and go walk down the hall and go to the bathroom or something like that. And it's wonderful that it's free, it's replaceable, it's renewable, and it's a joy for the adult to go out for 15 minutes and collect some stuff too. And then as far as PowerPoints go, and seasonal thinking, if there is time for a teacher to reorient the way that they're presenting materials so that it's seasonally applicable to the local area around plants. If you think of like, okay, we're gonna have a prairie theme for this school year, and each season we're gonna change the way that PowerPoint works in the way that we present the material, so that we're interweaving the idea that the plants actually have all of the lessons stored in them, from the root system through the stems and into the seeding and the flowering. How does that connect with the air? How does that connect with water? How does it connect with land? How does it connect with climate? And how does that connect to the lesson that you're learning that is theoretical, that we want you to see in the world? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cool idea. I like that. Okay, I know we're way over. I just want to, and I know some of you need to get up and get going, and that's fine if you need to get up and going. I just want to open it up real quick. Are there any folks sitting here that have a question you want to ask before we disband the panel? And you can still chit chat after, but it's kind of nice to hear everybody's thoughts. If there's any burning questions? People are like, no, we want to hear this better. Okay, well, let's thank our panel. On the presenter list that I sent out, so their contact information is there, so you can reach out to folks and network and connect.